Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk Scarlet Bee Balm. This is Monarda didyma, or Scarlet Bee Balm. This is our straight species Scarlet Bee Balm. It's native to Appalachian areas of North Carolina and up into the north and slightly into the Midwest, but it's been naturalized in a lot of areas. This plant spreads by rhizome and seed and can get to moving a little bit. We'll talk about that some in the video. This plant is in the Lamiaceae, or the mint family, and it does have a kind of a minty fragrance to the leaves. The leaves can actually be used in tea, and slightly fragrant flower that has these red tubular flower parts that draw in hummingbirds like crazy, also draw in native bumblebees like crazy that have learned to cheat the system a little bit. They can't actually go through the end of the flower, and so they drill a hole up near the base of the flower, and again cheat the system just a little bit. But native plant, native bee. This is a plant that Steph and I have left in this spot despite the fact that it's a little bit aggressive, and well, I'm more than a little bit aggressive, because during our open garden event it's actually absolutely peak flower and the bees are just covering it. There's just nothing else in the garden that draws them in like this plant. This is a fairly aggressive perennial. When it goes to sleep, it doesn't do a lot of spreading during the growing season. It's not like it's a ground cover type spreader. You know, other mint family members, you would definitely not want like mint, because as it just spreads during the growing season and during the winter time. So it does both. So it wakes up bigger every year and does it all season long. This one doesn't really spread during the growing season. It spreads during the winter by rhizome. And so when it wakes up in the spring, we kind of want to keep it in this corner, but it'll be back here in this azalea. It'll be back here in this, you know, other plants back there. So we have to rein it in a bit when it wakes back up. These are going to get between 2 and 4 feet in height. And would prefer maybe not quite full sun. You know, this is, you know, the further south you go, I would probably want it in a little bit, a slight little bit of protection. Ours is probably not getting quite enough sun. So it's gotten to the absolute maximum height, and it's leaning out this direction a little bit because this is the side the sun comes from. We're shooting this in the morning. The sun is going to come up over the house. It's leaning up toward that. And then I've got an oak tree back here that's going to put it in the shade, probably a hair earlier than it wants to be. But it seems it's fine. That's enough sun. It's probably getting, I would say, 5 hours of direct sun in this spot. I would prefer, again, a little bit more. I think it would be a little bit more compact at that point. These are hardy in zones 4 to 9, probably even 3 to 9. Just a really, almost everybody watching can grow this plant, and it's such a fun addition to the garden, just because literally it's just in movement all day long from all the things that are visiting it. We're shooting this early in the morning, and the bees haven't arrived on many of the other plants yet. We had a little bit of rain yesterday, so everything's a little moist, and so I'm looking at pollinator activity out here, but this one just gets started in the morning, and it's like this all day long. Again, the hummingbirds will be here soon as well. The flower structure is super interesting. First of all, these have square stems. A lot of things in the Lamiaceae or the mint family have square stems. You can feel that up under here, and it's a very rigid structure that holds these flowers up big and tall. The flowers appear in kind of a whorled pattern around this kind of rigid, rigid center part here. They have 2 distinct upper and lower parts to the flower, if I can find one right here, and actually make a pretty good landing pad for pollinators to come along, like the bees are this morning. They can land on these, and it holds on well. But they're in that perfect little circular pattern around the flower there, and again held up big and tall by that rigid stem. I've said a lot on this channel over the years that if there's a plant that's causing me more problems than it seems like it justifies, that we will remove it. This is a plant, though, that we haven't removed, despite the fact that we have to do a little bit of work on it to keep it here. And it's also in a spot that's slightly out of scale a bit here in the garden, right? It's right up against the patio, and most of the things I have around the rest of the patio are kind of lower growing, and then the size steps back. This just happens to end up in a spot here. it's wanted to get further and further this way because it likes moist areas. And so I imagine right up against this patio, you're going to find a little bit more moisture. You know, you flip a rock over, even in dry times, you'll find some moisture under it. So I would imagine that that's why it's migrated this way, and it's tucked right up against the path and right up against the patio at this point. But we keep this plant for a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's fragrant. The pollinators absolutely love it. It's got these hollow stems that some of our pollinators can overwinter on. It is the host plant for many caterpillars. So it has just all of these benefits here in the garden. It also is just absolute peak flower when we have a garden full of folks that are just all staring at it like this, because at that time, the flowers are a little past now as we're filming this. But if we'd have filmed it 2 weeks ago when it was showier than this, the fragrance was a little more, the fragrance was in the air a little bit more. Now I got to get in here really close to smell it. And the bees were it was just a carpet of bees across the top of it. So where we're going to use this plant is any kind of native garden, any kind of space where, you know, you can allow something to spread a little bit. You know, it will take slightly more moist or wetter conditions. So if you had a tricky spot at the bottom of a ditch or something like that, it would work in those kinds of areas. It's going to work in cottage gardens. You know, you can't grow something next to it that is, you know, my deodar cedar back there, it would eat it pretty quickly. That is not a very fast. I've got a dwarf conifer next to one of the most aggressive plants in the garden. So it probably needs to be with other slightly aggressive plants. So in some sort of meadow planting or something where things can push again, maybe another aggressive goldenrod that would bloom later in the season, or other native perennials that could push back against it just a little bit and hold up against the pushing that this plant does season over season. But definitely worth having. So again, I've said many times, I'll typically remove a plant that's causing me any kind of issues, but not this one right here. It'll work in an herb garden, because again, it is an herb. It'll work in any kind of woodland garden where you're still getting good bright light, so like high shade or something like that. But just a lot of different uses for this plant overall. This is not a particularly picky plant. We have a lot of organic material in our soil. We've added compost, we've added wood chips, we've added a lot going on here, and it's absolutely thriving in those conditions. They don't need to be overly fertilized, overly babied at all. Sometimes in heavy clay, they can take a little bit longer to get going. And we've had, you know, where some of our native perennials have really liked our very difficult situation out by our road that's heavy clay soils. Coneflowers will fit that description. The bee balm has actually been the most happy in our pretty highly amended soil back in our back garden area. Also, this spot gets a little bit of afternoon shade, which is probably helping it. This plant needs air movement. It does get powdery mildew, and it will get powdery mildew in this garden in the next month or so. We're filming this at the end of June. It started flowering. I would say the first flowers happened on it toward the 3rd week of May or so. Still flowering now. We have some new growth on here that's likely to get some additional flowers on them as the season goes on. So we'll have flowers on this, but we will begin as the days get more and more humid, and it's thick out here this morning as we're having this conversation. There's moisture on all the leaves out here. There's moisture on these leaves. We're going to get some powdery mildew on it. So the overall look of it is going to decline as the season goes on. Another thing that you're going to, you know, we're just going to have to tolerate here in the southeast. Again, a spot with good air movement is going to help that, because it's going to dry these leaves out a little faster, maybe extend the season where you're not getting powdery mildew. But by August, this thing's got some mildew on it. We don't cut it back, you know, I don't clean it up. It's got those hollow stems, and some insects can overwinter in the stems on this plant. This is not a plant to push with fertilizer. You could over push this plant with fertilizer. We fertilize this garden once a year. While this bee balm is dormant, I throw organic fertilizer out in the garden, and way less than the bag actually says. What's actually fertilizing this is our just native soil and the organic material that it's growing in, and look how it's just absolutely thriving out here. I think you can be told by the internet a lot of times that it would really love a midsummer fertilizing. Nothing, I don't think very many things want you to start pushing them when it's 100 degrees outside and the rain might be limited or anything else. I think that the plant needs to go through whatever cycle it goes through. For this plant, it's wake up, bigger, better, fuller, flower in May and June, and then, you know, the foliage declines a bit as the season goes on, and just letting that happen is probably just the best strategy overall. A few more fun things before we wrap this up. I want to show you real quick where it does. So we have this flower spike up here at the top, and you can see that we have side branching just down below that. And even below that, there's another side branch that's producing a flower right there. I can deadhead this, you know, as this declines. Here's an example of one here. I could come back in here and cut this back to one of these leaf nodes and probably get some additional branching and extend the flowering a little bit if we want to do that. So that is a strategy that we can use to increase the flowering a little bit later in the summer overall. Maintenance-wise, when this plant gets the hard freeze in the fall, it's going to go dormant. We choose to leave all of our native plants up during the winter time because these square hollow stems are a place where pollinators can overwinter and other insects can overwinter. There's a lot of these hollow stem native plants that are examples of this, and it's best to, if you can, to leave them up in the garden. I know it's slightly more untidy than a lot of folks would like to have, but that's what we choose to do. These need to be divided probably every 3 or 4 years because they are going to get super, super crowded. I mean, this thing is out competing itself basically. So I could go in here and take this whole clump out and re-divide it and plant maybe 3 plants back in here, and then I could go another 3 or 4 years. I haven't done that. What we've actually done is just contained it. And when it comes back up next spring, it's going to be bigger than we want to keep it. We'll dig those pieces out. We actually put them in containers. If you come to the open garden event, we probably had 20 of these we gave away, something like that, 15, whatever, that folks were able to take home with them with a warning that this plant can be, you know, that this particular bee balm and most bee balms can get to running in our garden. A lot of family members are like that. Basically deer proof, rabbit proof. I mean, that's the thing about growing things in the mint family and Lamiaceae that are just, you know, big for our ornamental gardens, especially in a world where I just heard something back here now. We have 2 bucks running around this area right now. And so as I was literally saying that, they were in the woods going, what are we talking about not eating over there? But this is Scarlet Bee Balm. This is just a straight native Scarlet Bee Balm. We have some other named varieties of bee balm throughout the garden, and we have some other species. This is definitely a genus worth looking into for your garden. Almost all of them, again, will get to running a little bit, but they're worth having because look at all the activity here. I've got a host plant for caterpillars. I've got a nectar source for native bees and hummingbirds and everything else. And I've got a place for insects to overwinter during the winter time as well here in the garden for, you know, a little bit more maintenance than I do on other things. So there you go. Scarlet Bee Balm. Thanks for watching.